Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Spiritual Talk TV. We have another fabulous guest today. But before we go too far, don't forget to subscribe. If you like what we do, we'd love your support by subscribing. There's a little button just below here, if I get my hand right, just below here. But getting back on with the show, our guest today is one of the most knowledgeable mediums of our time. Our guest is the brilliant Leonard Young. Leonard is a former minister with the SNU, the Spiritualist National Union. He holds a master's degree in theology and pastoral studies. He has held many positions within the Spiritualist movement, including vice president of the SNU. His work at the college spanned more than 20 years teaching and course organizing. Leonard has worked and demonstrated with many or some of the most noteworthy mediums of a generation, potentially some of the best mediums that have ever been. For example, Gordon Higginson, Ron Baker, Polge, Albert Best, and Mary Duffy. And so, well, too many more to mention. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure to introduce to you today, Leonard Young. Hi, Leonard. Thank you for joining us here today.
Hi.
Can I just, I know we just mentioned those names of some of the great mediums. Can we actually kick off from there, talking about what it was like working with some of those great mediums? And Leonard, I've got to include you in that as well.
Well, I won't put myself quite up there, but I think one of the great things about working with Gordon, Albert, Ron, and Coral was their great ability to be so accurate. And the information they imparted was far beyond anything that I've seen in recent years. Coral Polge was, as you know, a psychic artist, and I had the privilege of working with her on many occasions. And she was a wonderful lady to work with. She always put you at your ease. And when she came up to Manchester quite frequently on occasions, she was probably doing something for either the Hook Healing Trust or the Healing Guild. And she would sort of ask who was going to be demonstrating with her. And, invariably it would be me. Certainly in the latter part of her life. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. My first encounter with Coral was when I'd gone to a group session when I was back in the 70s. And she was drawing, spirit people. And she drew this beautiful picture, which is behind me. You can't see it, it's there, of a sort of Tibetan Chinese guy. And I was going from that sitting to do some work with Ron that evening. And I'd been for a sitting with Ron about 2-3 weeks before. And he talked to me about this person whom I'd known from being a young child, but you always want that bit extra, evidence. Well, I do. Don't let everybody else, but I do. And I unfurled this picture in front of Ron. And his words right out of his mouth was, "That's him." And that was it. And you have those moments. The first time I worked with her was at a church in south side of Manchester called Alexandra Road. it was eventually changed for a different name, but that's what it was, Alexandra Road South. A small church, but a modern building. It had been purpose-built as a spiritualist church. And it's where I actually did my first demonstration. And I was president at the time of that church. And Coral had come to do a joint demonstration with me. She was doing art, I was doing the demonstration, and she was just very warm. I was nervous, very nervous. You know, you can imagine this great person, and she just said, "We're going to have some fun," and that was it. We did, and she started to draw, and as she started to draw, she said, "Now, when you get something, just jump in." And she was drawing a young man. I never forget it. It was the first time I'd ever had that experience. Well, that type of experience. And as she was drawing it, she was talking about this boy, this young man. And she just said, "Over to you." And as that happened, as she said those words, I felt this spirit come and literally walk over to me.
Wow.
And it was a beautiful demonstration with her. I mean, the whole evening was spectacular, but that was the most remarkable thing of that evening. And the lady who got the portrait could take everything that we had said. So that was Coral. Ron, I met first. I think it was at an event in Manchester. And I went to a number of his lectures because Ron was a spectacular lecturer. He knew how to hold a congregation in the palm of his hand, and he could. And I got to know him over a very short space of time. I then went down to a place called Torquay, where there was, or Torbay really, where we stayed in. It was a Pontins place, and Shirley Chubb, who, bless her, is still alive today, was the organiser of this rather sort of spiritualist camp. There was 300 people there.
Wow.
And I'd gone down with another medium who was called Jackie Corbett from Leicester. Now, Jackie was a remarkable medium, remarkable in the sense that he was a trance medium as well. And when he demonstrated, you wouldn't have known that he was in trance, but he was. And the information that was imparted was absolutely fantastic. And it was when I was there that Shirley approached me and asked me if I'd do the demonstration on the Monday afternoon, because the medium that had been booked couldn't turn up. So I took the demonstration, and I suppose that was the first time I ever did a demonstration in front of about 350 people or more. I can't remember the number.
So, Leonard, just on that quickly, going back to what you said, the gentleman from Leicester, you said he was in a trance, but not a lot of people recognise that?
No, they wouldn't, because it was so subtle. I've only ever seen two mediums do that. One, the other medium was a lady called May Pickering, and she would just sit down in the second hymn of the demonstration. By the time she got to her feet, she was in trance after the hymn, as soon as the hymn was finished. And you wouldn't have known the difference. But with these two people, one of the most spectacular things was that the information just flowed. And you couldn't have argued with it. It was just so spot on. May was a person who was really a notable medium up in the Northwest. She came from Warrington. Many people knew her and loved her, you know, and she was just such a remarkable individual. And you don't see that today as much. I've not seen that level of quality of trance mediumship, I have to be honest, for a long, long time.
Yeah.
I mean, Gordon was an exceptionally good trance medium. Gordon was fun to work with. He was, I worked a lot with him at the college. He came on my weeks, I went on his. And, you know, it was in those days when you saw the best. I mean, you know, it was nothing for him to pull an address and a telephone number and something else and a number plate from thin air. And it was spot on. And same with Albert. Albert was the same. And you have to question, well, I do, why we don't see much of that today. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying we don't see as much of that as I did. I mean, it was commonplace when, you know, I first came into spiritualism. And I was talking to a lady today who was president of a church up here. She's now 91, bless her. And her husband has just passed away. And, you know, we were talking about old times and what it meant for us to have those experiences. And it meant an awful lot. I mean, you know, you got Doris North, who was a remarkable medium, you know, and Open Week years ago at the Arthur Findlay College, you had people like Doris North, Gordon, Albert Best, and others just demonstrating. And, you know, people went away in awe of what they saw.
On the back of that,
you know,
sorry, Leonard, I want to jump in on that because it's something I'm quite passionate about is constantly to develop. But how do we bridge that gap between modern mediumship and those guys that have gone before and their ability? How do we deepen that connection?
Well, I think from my point of view, I think it is training and how people are taught to use their mind. And to be honest with you, I have not found many people today that literally teach that. I mean, you know, Ron, when he moved up to Manchester many years ago, you know, when we sat in circle, which was once a week if he was at home, he would sit at the side of me and he would encourage you to, you know, focus your mind and do all of those things that were essential and to be still. And this is another thing that I find perhaps difficult to swallow. Some people think that, you know, doing a week-long course, you're going to walk away being a medium. Well, you know, I sat for over 5 years and still sit today. And you have to allow your mind to be in a very special place and to have that relationship with the other side.
Yeah.
And they did, you know, Gordon, Albert, Ron, Coral, many others. I mean, Coral never saw the spirit. She admitted it. She said, I don't see them, I only sense them. But her ability as a clairsentient was perhaps one of the most remarkable things to see. You know, I know there's YouTube videos of her, But when you worked with her, you knew what it was to sense spirit, certainly from that first encounter I had, because everything came that way. And people today are not, I don't believe anyway, I mean, somebody's going to shoot me down, I'm sure. They're not well trained. You know, and I think some people are too eager to get onto a platform than spend the time preparing themselves to be the vessel of communication. And that's, to me, the sad thing, particularly when I've seen what I've seen. I mean, another medium who... Sorry,
Leonard. I was going to say, do you think that also reflects the standard of mediumship today? Also reflects on the churches and the people that come through the door? Or is that something slightly different?
Well, I don't think it's for me to judge churches because, you know, each one's unique and different. But when I started going to Circle when I was in my teens, in my very early teens. And I had a teacher, she was called Miss Matthews. She was a rather rotund lady, if I can put it that nicely. But you did as you were told. You wouldn't budge from where she was training you. And she trained some really good mediums in Manchester back in the sort of 60s, and well, I thought it was early 70s for me, when she took me under her wing. And I always call her a bit of a witch, really. I shouldn't do, but she was. She used to watch me very carefully when I was in the service or the open circle. And she'd say, "What have you got?" And I'd say, "Oh, nothing." And she knew full well I'd got something, but I didn't want to get up and give it. So would she let go of that? No, she made you get up. She made you work, and she worked with you. And I think that's the knack. Gordon, when he was training people at the college, he worked with them. Ron, when he was training people, worked with them. Albert, I never had that privilege, really, of working in that sense with Albert, only in demonstrations and things like that, in various places, both at the college and Manchester, etc. But people used to be able to see exactly what was there. And they could literally, you know, without doubt, work right along with you and correct you. They'd say, "No, it's not that, it's this." And I think that's what's missing today. And some people don't like to be corrected. You know, you're always going to get that, Paul.
That's true.
And that's fine if that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
But I think discipline is the key. I mean, you know, I think of Jared Smith, you know, Jared came out roughly about the same time as me, as we both started taking demonstrations around the same time. And he came up to Manchester and we did a demonstration many years ago. It's the only one I ever did with him. But what a remarkable medium. You know, a lovely person, a remarkable medium who knows how to touch the other world. And that's the point. You know, the mind must, you know, the inner self must be able to touch that part of the other world, for me. And, you know, it's that sort of training stood me in good stead for many years until today.
Yeah. It's fair to say you have worked with so many wonderful mediums, and the stories,
Oh yeah.
and also Ron as well. And there's a recent publication out, The Unseen Powers, the automatic writings and essays of Ronald J. Baker. Certainly worth picking up, guys, if you come across that.
Well, it's available on Amazon, and that was a wonderful piece of work. The automatic writings. I was involved a little bit with it in its latter days, and in the recent publication, there was about 40 questions that were never published, or something like that. I can't just remember off the top of my head, and they were done with the three of us when we were up in Scotland.
Yeah.
And at a friend's house. And we used to sit in his living room near the window. The fire would be roaring in the grate. And where we were sat, it was like, 14 degrees below freezing.
Wow.
It was that cold. And Ron never flinched, and the question was asked, and as soon as the question was asked, the hand started to write. And it wasn't wrong. You could tell that. He was a wonderful trance medium. He was a wonderful man, was Ron. And he just had that knowledge that came through him, And while some people don't agree with everything that was put into the automatic writings, etc., and that's fine. I was there. I saw how it came to be. And, Alec, who actually asked most of the questions on that occasion, I think I asked about 4 or 5, were questions that you couldn't possibly expect a person to just answer. And there was they were answered with great ease. And I think that's one of the greatest things about Ron Baker.
Yeah.
They were, that was his writing. He was a great aura analyst as well. He was a bit like Harold Sharp in that sense, albeit that he drew different types of auras, Harold Sharp. And Ron's mediumship was equal to Gordon's. Absolutely equal.
Yeah.
And when they were together, if Gordon was doing a materialization, there's a photograph of Ron being sat at the side of him, opening the curtain to see the ectoplasm. And on one occasion, the person I was talking to today was down at the hall when Ron and Gordon were there. And out of the cabinet came a sailor boy and walked the full length of the library, had a conversation with the parent, because he'd been drowned or something at sea, from what I recall. And, just went back into the cabinet and disappeared. And then somebody else came out from this account in a wheelchair. And the same thing happened. Those are the days when Gordon was at on his top form, really, with his physical mediumship. But I think, like anything else, the political side did get to him. And he wasn't able to concentrate perhaps as much on that side of his mediumship as he would have liked. But there are other people that will have had encounters just like me, just like Pauline, and certainly like me with God, and they were remarkable. You couldn't argue with someone.
Yeah, sorry. Do you mind if we touch on that? I mean, what an unbelievable story that a physical manifestation. The little sailor boys came out, walk across the room, and spoke to his parent. That's just an amazing an experience in itself. Without even touching on grief or the healing aspect of that. But what does it take with trance mediumship? What does it take for physical mediumship?
Well, physical or trance mediumship, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes dedication, but it also takes a group of people to be dedicated to that particular phenomenon. I mean, people, I think it was Alec Harris, if they read the book by Alec Harris, what you see in that book is how he developed. And it took over, I think it was 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
He was one of these people who really got fed up with sitting night in, night out. And he sat. And this is the most remarkable thing about Alec Harris. He sat for 5 years and never missed a night. And on this particular night, so I think the story goes, he really got fed up and he said, I'm not sitting. But the group that was sitting to develop him did. And so they sat. And the trumpet that had been in the centre of the circle for 5 years and never moved decided to move, and it ended up on top of the piano or a table or something. From my recollection, I can't just totally remember where it landed. And from that day on, he sat frequently after that. I met a man many years ago in Preston. Frank Havard he was. He was a physical medium. And Ron had been to see him and he said, you should go. So I said, okay. So a friend and I went and sat with him. And this night, I honestly sat there, I was such a skeptic. I sat there and I thought, well, nothing's going to happen. And within a few minutes, he was in trance. And within a few minutes after that, everything was up in the air.
Wow.
And I thought, somebody's pulling strings here. But the most remarkable thing about him was he was quite a humble man. And he said, I'm going to have the light switched on, which was the red light. So you need to look carefully. And out of his nose and his mouth came all this ectoplasm. Right in front of my eyes. It just happened. And I'm sat there looking, I couldn't believe it, and it flooded the room that we were sat in. And I was knee-high. It was up to my knees, this ectoplasm. Knee-high in ectoplasm. Then the light went down. He said, I want you to just have another look, Leonard. So I said, okay. So the curtains flung back, the light went on, and you saw the ectoplasmic rod that moves the trumpets. And it was out of his nose, and it was in like a sort of zigzag, suspended in the air.
Wow.
And, you heard the voices through the trumpet, and they were, they knew everything about you. They talked to you and what you'd been doing that week in your circle or whatever. That was the conversation.
Wow.
And it was as natural as just having a conversation with you. Sadly, he died. He had a very bad heart. And he died back in the late 80s, I think, maybe early 90s, I can't just remember. But I sat with him about 5 times. And each time I was shocked. I took my developing circle with me on one occasion, and one of the girls, the guide had said to her, come inside the cabinet. And on the shoulder of Frank built the face of her grandfather, and she had a conversation with the grandfather.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It was a remarkable thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that is remarkable.
But people want this, but they're not prepared to sit for it. I mean, I'm not knocking Stansted. I think Stansted's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
To college, I should say. But I think there has to be some serious reevaluation of what goes on down there, and how people are taught. Because I'm not convinced, that some of what is being taught is good. I heard a story the other day from a person who'd been down very recently on a particular week to do with trance and what have you. And this person who was teaching them told them to just go and sit on their own. Well, you might as well sit on your own, but who are you going to talk to? And you need a group of people to help you develop. And that can't be done. I don't care what anybody says. I don't agree that can be done over the internet. There's all these circles going on over the internet, and there's a lot of, transfiguration and goodness knows what. And I have to question it, to be honest. Unless I can touch it and see it with my own eyes, I'm never convinced.
So if I wanted
if
I wanted to create such a circle in person with the right dedicated people, is there some truth in that there should only be one medium that sits and the rest sit to support them?
That's true, yes. That's how I was developed. People sat for me. I made a bargain with my group. As I said to them, if you sit for me, then I'll do a teaching session on a Friday in a developing circle where we can all, it's just for clairvoyance and things. And they agreed, and they sat with me for years. And they were dedicated to it. I have upstairs in one of my rooms upstairs a table that was that I'd found in one of the houses that I'd purchased, and it was a 3-legged round table. And it's not one of these small little things that you can push with one finger. 3 or 4 people can sit around this one. You can get your hands on it.
Yeah.
And one of my sitters was a carpenter, and he fixed it all up for the circle. And we used it frequently. And it's that sort of, it's service to one another, really. And I think that's the thing that we have to consider.
I agree.
What service are we doing?
Yeah. Sorry, Leonard. There'll be people at home wondering how the table came and what the table was for within a service. There'll be guys that are listening to our podcast today and wondering, what does Leonard mean by that? So what sort of part did the table play?
Well, table tilting is something that happened. I mean, if people read the books of, the autobiography of Emma Harding in Britain, I was behind that publication. Being republished back in the 80s, 90s, I can't just remember. And she was a table tilter, and she used to go sit in the table, and, she was a person who'd go to a circle morning, noon and night if she could. And it's a way of communication. it's not the most ideal because you have to spell certain things out, unless, of
Yeah.
course, you can get something more dynamic, better movement, sort of levitation and such things like that,
Yeah.
where the spirit can actually move the table. So I always placed a table in to harness the energies, and I don't like the word energy, as you know.
Yeah.
But to harness the energies within a physical circle.
Yeah.
It was always a good thing sometimes to put one in, just in case it was getting a bit, it needed to be there and to help with the development of that particular circle.
Yeah, and for those at home that are listening, guys, it is quite amazing. I've seen a dining table move in that way with our hands on top, so it's quite a phenomenon in itself. So,
I've seen a table move quite happily on its own.
really,
Mm.
that's always interesting.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. And those are the best things. Ron used to say, sit around it, put your feet underneath it and wait and see. And yeah, you could.
Do you think, though, that Hollywood has done damage to mediumship in terms of sitting in a dark room, when we talk about certain phenomenon happening? Do you think there is a fear factor that's creeped into mediumship?
I don't think it's a fear factor. I think it's a curiosity, and it's become a game for some people. It's like, I was watching a series of Downton Abbey not so long ago, and in it was a Christmas special. And in it, they're using, the Ouija board, which everybody says you shouldn't use, but I don't notice that either. And, they'd been playing with it on 2 occasions, and on one, the last occasion they used it, it was one of the maids and Rose, I think it was Rose, Ruby, or whoever, from the kitchen. And, and you look at that and you think, well, you don't know how real that could be. It's patience. With any phenomena, whatever it is, it's time, dedication, patience. And it's only when the conditions harmonize in every way with the people who are sitting, with the room, etc., that things actually do start to happen. And, I've been blessed in my life. I've seen it. I've seen Queenie Nixon. Queenie was a wonderful transfigurating medium. And I went to see her at a church with my mother, alas, who's now in the spirit world. And we sat two rows away from her. We had a conversation with people who had passed away. And at the end of the seances that she did, or the transfiguration seances, one of the most remarkable things I always found with Queenie was Paul, who was her guide, would stand her up, and you saw it in the red lamp. And she grew to the height of what Paul would have been.
Wow.
And I saw that happen. I thought, am I seeing this? Is this real? And that's what I saw. Everybody else saw it in that room that night. We were all amazed. Those are the things that have disappeared from spiritualism.
Was that under red light conditions, Leonard, or was that in, under red light? I've seen a lady where her head would go up a lot higher. Was it whole body, or was it just the neck and head going up?
No, the light was on her whole body, and you could just see her going, because at the end he would always say a prayer of blessing, or a prayer to close the thing down. And it was, you couldn't, well, I couldn't believe it. I saw it, my mother saw it, everybody else in the room saw it, and we were all shocked, and Queenie was only about 5'3", and this image in front of me was nearly 6 foot tall.
Wow. There's nothing,
and that was the image that I saw.
Yeah, and there's nothing in the medical books, to say that the body can grow up to 6 foot. That's just amazing.
No. But you see, what people see these days on YouTube, that's nowhere near what I saw. Transfiguration and things like that. I mean, there are good mediums, and there are mediums who are not so good. They're naughty. And, I've had to expose 2 3 actually in my lifetime. All were physical mediums, and all were complete frauds.
That's such a shame.
We get them.
Such a shame.
Yeah, it is. It's sad. I mean, why anybody would want to do something like that beats me, but they do.
Yeah.
And I think it's, something people need to be aware of, that these things do happen. And regardless of what people say, I always say, prove it. And when you challenge somebody like that, to put your money where your mouth is. And I suppose I got this from Maurice Grosse, who was a psychical researcher. He was a very frank man. If anybody wants to see him, you'll find him on YouTube.
Okay.
Sadly passed on now. But he was responsible for the research into and dealing with the Enfield poltergeist. Maurice was a frank man, but he always used to say, prove it to me. And he would watch people like a hawk. You couldn't get one over on Maurice. And, he was, there are three or four psychical researchers that have really impressed me in my time. Maurice was one of them. Archie Roy was the other. Trish, who is still alive.
Yeah, Trish, you interviewed Trish, yeah.
Yeah. Trish is a very, very direct person. And David Fontana. David, when he used to come on my weeks, well, Maurice did, and Archie did. But when David used to come, all he wanted was a sitting from me. He couldn't be bothered with anything else. He'd do his lectures for me and one thing or the other. And he was such a charming man. He really was. And all he wanted, will you give me a sitting? I used to say, yes, of course I will, And he was always, one of those people that was very grateful for, having had a sitting. That I was involved with prison back in the early turn of the 90s, around that time, I think it was. Maybe a bit later. And Archie, Maurice, and David, Monty Keane, and others, and Trish was on that panel. And it was always a great pleasure to work for them and work with them, because they did like to see what was, where you were up to in your development, and, what could you do, and so on and so forth. And, Maurice never believed in darkened rooms. He didn't like them. He says, this is the problem, and to some degree you have to, take your hat off to him, because there are many recorded cases of phenomena happening outside of darkened rooms.
Yeah, it's true.
And, you see, nobody, people wouldn't probably, well, there certainly some people I know wouldn't today put up with the test conditions that he would impose upon them, certainly Morris anyway, because they would be very strict. And he'd have everything there, you know, cameras, the lot.
I love the idea of it, but following on from that, I know there's an organization in America called Helping Parents Heal that like their mediums to be certified, and they're assessed by similar kind of people. But how do you feel about mediumship itself being certified? All mediums, all working mediums, not being allowed to work till they've undergone some kind of scrutiny.
That to me, I mean, I did my CSNU, DSNU, I was MSNU, as you know, until I left the union. And I did it because it was a thing to do. I'll be honest. Not the ministership. The ministership, in those days, ministership was an honour. Today it seems to be handed out quite differently to what it was in those days. That said, you know, that is the choice of the union. It's not my choice.
Yeah.
But a piece of paper doesn't make you a medium. It sometimes, you know, I mean, I've seen mediums who have had qualifications, and their quality of mediumship for me is poor. And that's a bit sad, because you know, if I would go back to the 80s, you know, the panels in those days, some of them were quite, you know, they were ruthless, from as I recall. I don't know what they like to have anything to do with them, so don't want to. You know, that was the scenario. So I think it's good if, I think qualifications are good if those who are testing people have a very good ability to test. But it comes down, you know, to the question, who examines the examiners?
Yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely.
You know? Yeah. And that's where, you know, I have no axe to grind with the way the exponents and education goes on in the union. It's nothing to do with me. But I think if spiritualism wants to move ahead, it's going to have to address some of these problems that are, how can I put it, you know, relevant in a movement today.
Yeah.
And sadly, it's that. I went to a demonstration recently, well, not so long ago, and the young woman got up, and as she come in, she sort of, I looked at me with her eyes, and I thought, I'm going to get a message. I knew straight away what she was doing. She sort of eyeballed me, as they say. Anyway, and sure as eggs are eggs, she went to somebody else first, and then she said, I want to come to me. She wanted to come to me, so I said yes. And she started to relay information that I had no idea whatsoever of. And I'm not one of these people that, you know, will say yes to something when it's a no. You know, I don't do it, and I don't see the point. If you can't work a no as a medium, then you've got a problem. And, you know, she became rude, and that happened twice to me. because she said, "You don't really want to be here." I said, "I do." I said, "I wouldn't have paid the £3 to come in, if I didn't want to be there." She then went to the person sat next to me, who was at the time a student of mine, and she tried the same tactic with her, and it didn't work. So she really had a difficult time, and I don't want to give anybody a difficult time. I think that's the wrong thing to do. But I can't say yes to something if it's no. Or if I don't know, I'll just say I don't know.
So do you think she was connecting to you psychically rather than actually connecting with anybody specifically?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's why she, looked at me as she came in. She was looking, I mean, I know some mediums sit on a rostrum before they demonstrate. They never go into the medium's room. They go and sit in the chair, and they're looking around the room who they're going to go to.
Yeah.
I think that is the wrong thing to
Agreed.
do. I mean, I always insisted when I was president of the church, they go into the medium's room. If they wanted a cup of tea with us started, fine, we give them one. And we left them alone to be quiet, because that's what they needed to be. And that was the instructions that I always gave to my committee, that anybody comes, if I'm not here, that's what you do.
Yeah.
And we never had those problems. We never had rudeness on a platform. You'd never have got away with it back in the 80s, 70s. You just wouldn't. But today, some people are really rude. And that's happened to me twice at the same place, man. I am. But it's because the people are trying to justify what they're doing, and they can't. And, if there's no message there, why give it? I've done demonstrations in churches. And I got up. I remember going to a church I dedicated many, many years ago, before the new church was built. And I'd known the couple that had run it for a long, long time. And it was the Harvest Festival. And I always did the Harvest, and I always did the Christmas service for them. And I'd gone in, I'd given the address, we'd had a lovely address. And I sat down and I thought, I haven't got anything. And I just turned around to the chair and I said, "I'm sorry, I haven't got anything, so I ain't going to demonstrate." And I got to my feet and I said, "It would be very wrong of me to try to demonstrate when I cannot demonstrate, because I've got nothing tonight." And I got the biggest round of applause I've ever had, apart from in a theatre, when I've done demonstrations in big theatres.
That's but that's integrity.
Honesty speaks for itself.
Yeah, honesty, integrity.
Well, it has to be. If you can't do it, then own up to it. Don't try to waffle your way through something. I couldn't do that.
Leonard, with all your years of experience of mediumship, and it is vast. Okay, let's pretend I'm someone who would like a reading, because I think there's a real responsibility with mediumship and in terms of the grief process and helping us to deal with that grief process through hopefully having a connection with a loved one. So if I'm someone who has no idea about mediumship, how do I find an ethical medium, somebody of a standard that I can trust?
The answer is I don't know. I always think if you find a medium that is good or fairly reasonable, then watch them demonstrate first. Do that. If you're happy with it, then approach them, see if they do sittings. Not every demonstrator will. I don't do sittings these days, but I'm more an astrologer and do other things. But certainly, I think it's worth, if you're going to spend a lot of money, then do yourself a favour, go and do your research first.
Yeah.
I mean, I know of a person who's quite eminent. I've never had the privilege of watching that individual demonstrate, but somebody went to her for a sitting, not in Manchester, it's not in this end of the country, and she demonstrated very well. But then when she went for a sitting, being charged something like £70 or £80 for a sitting, and it didn't work. Not that it didn't work, she gave stuff. She still took her 85 quid or whatever it was.
Wow.
And I think there's a thing, you know, that you have to look at very carefully here. And it's, you know, if somebody was having a sitting with me, I mean, I used to do sittings years ago. I remember being locked away on open week at the college doing about 13 a day. If you don't get it, admit it, and don't charge them.
Yeah.
If it's not that. I mean, there are times when I've been doing a reading, you know, if it's a chart or something else, and I've heard a spirit person come in. I put the chart down and gave them what I got, and then carried on with the chart.
Yeah.
Because, or the other readings that I probably do. And you have to do it that way. There's no other way. You know, I remember being inside, we were doing a demonstration down over East London, I think it was somewhere. Many years ago, there was three of us, and there was Ray and Joan Grix, and we did what was called Across the Vale. And we did theatres, and we were going to this place, and it was our agent's birthday. So we'd gone into a jeweller's shop. We were going to buy him something for his birthday that night. And we went into this shop, and we'd seen something we wanted to buy for him. The other two agreed, so I ended up dealing with the woman behind the counter. And by chance, as she was handing me the article, she touched my hand. Not that anybody should come rushing up and touch my hand, because it won't work. It only worked on that occasion, I think. And I heard a voice say to me, "That's my daughter." And I turned to the other two. I said, "I've just had a spirit person come to me telling me that a mother's in the spirit world, and that's her daughter. And she's upset." So I said, "Well, you better tell her." I said, "I can't do that," you know. And there was just something inside of me that said, well, you know, let's do, you know, take the bull by the horns, as it were. And so I went up to her. I said, "I hope you don't mind." I said, "But my friends and I are mediums." I said, "And you just touched my hand." I said, "And I've got your mother here. She's not been over the other side very long." "No, that's true," she said. I said, "She's telling me about her house, and that you're trying to sell it, and you're really having a hard job of it." And she said, "Oh, yes," she said, and the sigh of relief came, you know, from the voice. And I thought, okay. I said, "Well, she'd just come to tell you." I said, "I can't give you any more, so don't ask me. You know, the house will go within 3 weeks. There's my card, gives a ring and let me know how you get on." She phoned me up 3 weeks later, the house had gone.
Beautiful.
And you just don't, you know, it was help that she needed.
At that moment.
And you can't not give something when a person's in need.
Yeah.
You know, and those are the gems of mediumship. They really are.
Sometimes the shortest messages are the most powerful.
Oh yes, that's absolutely true.
And that kind of
Doing
leads in.
demonstration
Sorry, Leonard, go on.
I was doing demonstration in the Midlands, or just below the Midlands, I think it was. Oh, back in the 80s, with the three of them. We got a theatre, and there was about nearly 2,000 people in this place. And it was one of the first big dems of that size I'd ever done. And I I said to the others, oh, I'm so nervous about this. Oh, you'll be all right. And so the other two had done their bit. It was my turn. And I said to the spirit world, you better give me something before I get on my feet, otherwise I'm not getting up. And nothing. So I got to the microphone and I heard a voice say, go to the circle at the top on the left-hand side. On, the steps as you come down the circle.
Yeah.
So I said, I want to go up there. I don't know who you are. I said, somebody right on the end there has had a link with a policeman who has passed away. And it was a young man. He wasn't an old man. Yes. And she said, that's me. And I said, well, if that's true, in your bag, you have a photograph of him because you purposely brought it tonight, and you have a ring belonging your mother. And she said, yes. And then the message went on. I can't remember it all. But that was my introduction to doing demonstrations in front of thousands of people. And you just go with the flow.
That's
You have
brilliant.
to trust, you see. And that's the thing that people have to do.
From a mediumship perspective, do you find that there is a difference between public demonstration and demonstrating in a spiritualist church?
I think if you're demonstrating mediumship, you have to remember that it is a spiritual opportunity. That's the way I looked at it. And when we did the theatres, I couldn't have cared less whether there was 2,000, 3,000 people there. I always said a prayer.
Yeah.
In front of them all before we started. And I was never challenged. Never. But I think if you look at some of what goes on today, some people do, readings in pubs and so on and so forth, restaurants and whatever. That's really not my cup of tea. I don't think it's really the way forward for mediumship. Some would disagree with me, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I think you have to be realistic. And for me, serving, if you have a hall and you present it as like a service or a church, then that's where we need to be.
Yeah.
If people want mediumship, they need to find the right place for that. And the right place is a centre or a church, whether it's a Christian spiritualist church, SNU, or some other organisation.
Yeah.
There has to be some reverence to do with it. And when people say to me, it's like, somebody said to me the other day, oh, I'm going to join a circle, and I'm going on. Oh, I said, where are you going for that? I did it. Very nice. Oh, we're doing it online.
Oh.
No, that doesn't sit with me. I'm not saying you can't do mediumship on Zoom. I've done it, so I can do it. But I prefer the interaction from
Absolutely.
a church, and because otherwise, people are getting up, going to have a cup of tea, and coming back with a glass of water or whatever it is during the course of this, and I just don't think that's appropriate.
Yeah, there is a lot of services that have
That's
sprung
me.
up. Yeah, there's a lot of services out there, Leonard, that have sprung up due to COVID, that have continued, and they do those services. And I've done a service where you'll see people get up, walk around, and go and make a cup of tea, and that, if you're not careful, that takes your focus. It's quite a difficult thing to
Of course
do.
it does. And, spiritualism, whichever way you look at it, or whatever type of spiritualism, because it's so diverse these days, you have to think about the reverence for the thing.
Yes.
And to me, that is, that's paramount.
And that's something I wanted to ask you.
I didn't sit.
Yeah, I wanted to go into that just a little bit, into the reverence and the actual belief system. A lot of mediums working today don't even have a faith or belief system around God. How do you feel about that?
Well, I can't speak for others because that's not appropriate for me to do. Each to their own. People have their own philosophy, which is not technically. I mean, you look at, what is it that spiritualism teaches? Go to the Lyceum Manual and, have a good read of the golden chain and silver chain recitations.
Yeah.
Because in there it gives us, a good paradigm to live by.
Yeah.
Seven principles are a good paradigm. Some would say they're not a creed, others would say they are a creed, and so on and so forth. Does it matter? I think it matters in the sense that you give to the gift that you have everything that is there to help it work. And, I'm, not only, studied theology and stuff like that, but I've spent time in religious orders and things like that have, when I was 19, I was I went into a monastery there. And part of it is what you find out about, one, yourself, and two, your own spiritual self. You see, prayer to me is very important.
Yeah.
I've always prayed. And I do to this very day. It's important to pray. It's important to have that conversation with God, whatever you term God to be. Some people don't have it. Well, if, they don't have that sort of spiritual essence inside themselves, if I can put it that way without offence to anyone. If that's the way you see it, then that's the way you see it. But I would ask the question, what is your mediumship like?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Gordon was a very spiritual man. Ron was, Gordon. Well, I used to sit up late at night sometimes when he was at the college, and we'd have long conversations on various things, and certainly about prayer. And Gordon could pray. He knew the art of prayer. So did Ron and Albert.
That's an interesting statement in itself. When you talk about the art of praying, what is it that makes it so, or what could it be to make it, or take it up to another level that's there for us? How do we get?
Well, Prayer is, well, prayer to me comes from within. It's something that you might say out loud, but it goes far beyond that, because it's your soul, your spirit communicating with the divine.
Yeah.
There are moments, I mean, meditation is prayer. You know, I think James Dillett Freeman said it nicely when he said, prayer to me is many things. To pray, there are many types of prayer. Prayer that gives thanks, prayer that is private, and prayer that is collective. All kinds of prayer are spiritual devotion. And that's what it is. It's a devotion to the Great Spirit. It's not anything else. It's your love for God, whatever that might be, within your own spirituality. You know, I mean, when I was a boy, you know, I used to spend at least half an hour a day in prayer. It was something I did. And much later in life, and even now, there are days when I will, you know, spend time in prayer. But the prayer by rote, I get a bit fed up with, because it's potent in its own way, but it's not always coming from the very essence of who a person is. And I think that's prayer, when it comes from the very sort of peace of yourself. And it can lift the mind, it can lift the soul, it can lift the person. You know, they might have a depressed day and they pray for 15, 20 minutes a day, talking to God, putting everything there into the hands of God. Yeah, believe me, it is powerful. Prayer is powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
I mean, you know, you only have to use, I think it was Yogananda that talked about various types of prayer.
Yeah.
You know, he was a yogi, but he knew how to commune with the great power. Emma Hardinge Britten did. She did. You know. And I think to some degree, people like Andrew Jackson Davis and others of that time, prayer was important to them.
Yeah. 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 Thank you.
But it's different for everybody.
It is absolutely. And it's an aspect that I've only just started to discover for myself. But Leonard, we have been going for an hour and 15 minutes already. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Right.
But before we go and finish this evening, there's a couple of questions I'd like to ask you. Firstly, what is it within mediumship that we're not talking about, but we should be?
I don't think we're talking about, you know, the real questions of mediumship. You know, what is mediumship, and how to answer that question. People don't answer it. They don't. You know, it's certainly not a question that, you know, that you get asked that much these days. Mediumship has to be something special. And the question is, who's making it special? Some do, you know, some have that vision in their head. Others just think that, you know, it's something you can acquire as, as quickly as ABC. Well, I'm afraid it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Even if people say they're a natural medium, I question, we're all naturals.
Yeah.
But I question when I hear what they're able to do. Training is the thing. Why are we not training people intensely? And, the Arthur Findlay College was donated to the Union for one particular purpose, to be a college of development. Now, whatever Arthur Findlay had in mind, I think what is happening today is far remote from what he intended that place to be. Now, I could be wrong with that, and there are those who work there these days will probably say I'm wrong. But, when I went as a, in my youth, as it were, to the college, I'd sit at the feet of great masters and listen to what they had to say. And then I'd go and try and put it into practice, whether it be in my developing circle or elsewhere. And that's what we had to do. Today, it's, it's wrong what I'm seeing, because it's become a commercial venture for some people.
Yeah.
Nothing more. Money isn't everything in life. All right, it helps, but you don't have to have thousands of pounds dripping out your pockets. Service is the key to any success in mediumship, in my opinion. Giving service. I think getting away from the pettiness of what goes on in various institutions. You hear people with the most horrendous stories, and makes your hair stand on end. Not that I've got very much, but these days, and it does make your hair stand on end, because that you've got to get away from the ego, move the ego out of the way. And there has to be, instead, a spirit of humility, dedication, and more to the point, serving people in the spirit world.
Yeah.
I think that's all I could say about it. I think there are difficulties because, there are political institutions, and politics, in my opinion, destroys the spiritual side of it for me.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want, I couldn't go back into anything like that. I've seen too many institutions, and believe me when I say that, spiritualism is not the only one that has this problem. It may raise its head a bit more, plus there's also, people are dealing with very sensitive people sometimes. So there's that side to it as well. But,
Yeah. Yeah. Last question, Leonard. What's next for you?
Oh, no, I'm retired.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you got any plans to carry on working?
Well, I do a little bit here and there. I'm up to Wales, I think, next month. So I'm looking forward to that. I teach. I have my own school.
How can people find that? Because people want to know where you're teaching, because I know from today people will watch this interview and they'll probably want to get involved in some of your teaching classes. So where can they go to find it?
Just go. Well, they can find out about me. Just go onto Facebook.
Okay.
Most people are on Facebook these days.
Absolutely.
And I say to them, go there, find Leonard Young, my photograph is a lot younger on there than it is on here. you'll see me there, and just check out whether it is me. And that's all they have to do is ask. You know, I'm not one of these people that likes big publicity. I've done all that in the past, and been there, done that, worn the T-shirt, I think people say. They can get in touch with you, you know how to get hold of me.
Absolutely.
Or they could write to me, through the school, which is the Mercurial School. And that, if I get you the email address, I will. It's the, I can never remember. mercurialschool@gmail.com. MERCURIAL school @gmail.com. So they can get hold of me that way.
Thank you, Leonard. It's been such a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you for joining us tonight.
No, privilege is mine, always. You take care.
Thanks ever so much. Bye, Leonard.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.